Welcome everyone to a Board of Selectmen's meeting. We are going to start off with a public hearing, but first we'll need pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this public hearing is required by state law in order for us to adopt a remote participation policy for meetings such as the Board of Selectmen, committee meetings, other board meetings. And towns across the state are following suit. In order for us to allow any type of remote participation, we need to have a policy. So this is the first, this is the public hearing for the policy. And we will have it noted in our minutes in our agenda. Sorry that it's our first reading as well. So this allows for the, if a body member of the board is participating by remote process, then the public is allowed to participate by a remote process, and it has to be by telephone or video technology. There can't be any email or text messaging in order to participate. So pretty much the same as we've done all along. Any questions or comments? This it's a rather brief policy, one page. So if anyone wishes to read it.
One question. So you stated that public could attend by Zoom, we'll say, if a board member chooses.
That's the way it's written.
Okay, so I just was curious. Also, normally with no advance, the board members going to attend by Zoom. But if they don't, the board doesn't have, the public doesn't have that option. So how do you advertise that?
Madam Chair, it's a very good question. And I've thought about that. And I think what we'll continue to do is continue to post the Zoom link on the agenda, but maybe change the wording there that says, you know, in the event that the whole board is in session, it will not be a public component, but if there's somebody that is out, then the meeting will be by Zoom, something to that effect. But at the very least, continue to print the Zoom address on there, so that if somebody on short notice has a medical issue, board member or so forth, then we can light that up.
Yeah, that's a good question. This policy, you know, we did receive this from Maine Municipal Association. This is a matter of consistency, but certainly, you know, other questions come up, let us know. Any other questions or comments before we close the hearing? Yes,
I
John.
do have one other comment, Madam Chair. I don't believe this prohibits us from having consultants or other folks that we work with come in via Zoom.
Okay.
That was gonna be my question. It's been beneficial when staff is on vacation, still willing to show up to meeting,
Right.
for consultants, lawyers, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Any final comments? Going once. Yes, Mark.
Is this published on the town's website for the people to read?
If it's not, it will be, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Any final comments?
Well, just a question.
Yes.
Is, reason why I'm here, something I should bring up now or wait until you invite us into the conversation?
Is this public to speak on a non-agenda item?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can enter in, we'll announce when that arrives on our agenda. You're welcome. All right, we'll close the public hearing at 6:05. We'll begin the regular Board of Selectmen meeting. Call that to order. We've got a quorum. Steve Filbert called in advance and said he was going to be absent today. Any board members have a conflict of interest they feel they need to disclose? Someone should come up during the meeting, just let us know. Adjustments to the agenda. We do a slight adjustment, just in number 4. Not only do we approve the regular meeting minutes, but the annual organization meeting minutes, which occur first. So that will be one adjustment to the agenda. Did I miss anything else, Joe?
No, Madam Chair. That's it.
We have got the tax commitment presentation
Yes.
as well.
All right. So good to see you guys all again this year. Welcome at the new. So this is that famous time of year here in Rangeley where we go to commit taxes. This year, there's been a lot of talk about the new TIF in the new TIF district. Joe and I have been going back and forth on this the last few days with our economic development person, Daryl, Maine Revenue Service, countless other people, the owner of RJD. And it has been determined by Maine Revenue Service that because of the timing, we have yet to get approval from the DECD for our TIF district. That couple different things. We have yet to get an approval letter from the DECD at the time of commitment. Second thing, it is basically the stance of Maine Revenue Service that because the letter of approval for the TIF district was not received prior to April 1st of 2021, they will not recognize the TIF district this year. So therefore, we will have to push the TIF off until 2022. Just so everybody's aware, we will still be able to recognize the 2019 to 2019 OAV. So that will still stay as submitted on the original application. So when it does happen, we'll be able to grab the growth from 2019 all the way through to 2022 and still be able to use it. It's just this year, because of the timing of the application, because it has not been approved in their timeline, they're not willing to recognize it. Therefore, their recommendations are we commit this year's taxes like normal, and then next year we go ahead and proceed with the TIF district and do what we have to do to get that done. So that being said, I passed out a small packet to you folks on the front page. It basically gives a little table of our mill rates and overlays over the past 5 years, abatements and supplementals that were issued. This year's supplementals may look a little funny, but we had a couple tree growth penalty calculations and tree growth penalties that for lot splits that have happened in town. So we don't typically pick up $159,000 worth of supplementals, but this year, 2 of those supplementals alone were over 112,000. So, but that's what happens when properties are removed from tree growth on the water. We have those type of penalties. But so on that table is again the previous 5 years. Last year being the top rate on that. So we had a 1384 mill rate last year with a $30,000 overlay. If you look, well, before I go too far, we are going to certify 100% this year again. Next year, looking out at the future, we're going to be probably certifying around 90 next year. And then basically what that means is our assessments compared to what the properties are actually selling for on average in town are about 90%. We had enough sales in town to kind of show they were able to do 2 independent studies. And right now it shows our waterfront is basically 84%, and our regular residential is 94%. So our off water stuff is 94%. So that's kind of where our newest ratios kind of have us in the direction. This is a previous 18-month study. It's not current to April 1st of 2021, but this is what kind of dictates our ratio every year. So next year it looks like we'll be in the 90s as far as what we'll be able to certify. So we'll have to make those adjustments to the homestead exemptions, veterans exemptions, and so on. we picked up in new valuation. We increased around $4,077,000 in new value from 2020 to 2021. Which is a pretty decent amount, but there's a lot of activity going on in town. There's a lot of construction going on. And then as voted on July 6th, the interest rate, I think, was published at 7%, and it will be the 6% max by basically by the treasurer's office. They give us a max limit every year. 6% will be our max rate that we'll publish on the tax bills for delinquent taxes, but I think in the town report it was 7%. So.
Now I'll just hold you there, just see if there's any questions from the board on page 1.
I did want to also mention that in the TIF district, I did run the numbers on the district, and it looked like if we were able to use it or recognize it this year, we would have shown around $1.6 million of increase, and that was from 2019 to now. In new value, which would have resulted around $26,000 that we would have put into that TIF. Well, depending on what mill rate, I just put the middle of the road mill rate on our estimates here, but it would have put somewhere in that $26,000 mark in that TIF line item. So on the second page and third page and so on, I've highlighted basically mill rates versus overlays like we do typically every year. I let you folks look down through them. We've seemed to average somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 in our overlays of the most recent years. So I'll just let you look down through. Right now, again, currently our mill rate is 1384. You can see that we've had some increases in the budget that the $4 million in new value couldn't quite keep up with. And I have the numbers here. So overall, our total appropriations were up $694,298 over last year's. We had the county taxes up around $24,000. The municipal budget's up $222,000, and the school budget's up $448,000. So there was a pretty good increases in our totals to be raised for this year. And therefore, that's kind of a result in an increase in mill rate to cover. So on the first page that I printed off on page 2.
I'm just going to stop you right there. Can that be in the minutes? Can that itemized, those itemized increases be in those select meeting minutes?
Sure. Oh,
Yeah,
all
go
right,
ahead.
all right. So on page 2, basically the first highlighted option, we show a mill rate of $14.82 with an 18,127 overlay. The next page shows a $14.83 mill rate with a $23,330 overlay. The second page, the next page would be basically this is one whole dollar per mill over what we committed last year. So 1484 mill rate with the 28,533 overlay. And the last page is typically we haven't been over 30,000. I stopped at the 1485 with the $33,736 overlay. And now I'm ready for your thoughts and what direction you folks would like to go with.
Questions or comments? Can refer back to page 1 for that list of overlays from prior years. What has spent out for abatements? So Matt, is there any reason not to go with the 18,000 and change overlay?
We do have a decent sized operating budget, so it's always good. I always use this example, and not that anybody intends for this to happen. But we had in Corinna a few years ago, we had this kind of some numbers got transposed when it came from the budget committee down through the assessor's office, and the school budget went out, it was supposed to have been 2,225,000 and change. And actually, that's what was given to us. It should have been 2,255,000. So we underrose $30,000. And they only kept a very bare minimal overlay. So they only had 16,000 in overlay. So they had two choices at that time. It was either have a special town meeting to ask the town if they want to, take out 30,000 from surplus, or if they wanted to do a separate new tax bill. And at that time, the board chose to do a separate tax billing of 30 cents per thousand, and send it out to everybody. So it's there to use if we need to, and if it doesn't, it gets rolled over each year, but I'm not sure
Okay.
how much other besides abatements and anything, if anything else has ever been. No.
Just had to ask.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions from the board? Go ahead, Shelley.
So with the tree growth penalties,
Yes.
that for the removal, putting a structure on there, does those funds, do they get put back into the general account?
Yes. Yep.
So that's not funds that you could put aside just in case of that overlay issue?
Right, so
Well, the
when,
money will be sitting there anyways, right?
right, and when year end, that's already been moved over, right, because those payments have already
Yeah,
been
this is very
received
payments, it got closed out to the general fund.
at the year end.
Right. So if that's there, would you feel comfortable with the 18,000 overlay, knowing that those extra funds are in our general? I'm just throwing that out there because, we're taking stuff out of a reserve account that we have to give some tax breaks this year. So I'm just saying, like, the most we could do would be more beneficial to the taxpayers.
I'd be okay with it. As Matt noted, the only way you could access that one would be a special town meeting to appropriate for that purpose, but it is there. It does exist. But Madam Chair, if I can elaborate on that,
Yes.
the highest abatement to date was what, just over 7,000, right?
Yeah,
So that's.
that was this year, I know that one, part of that larger number than years past was an abatement supplemental for wrong ownership. So part of it is, it's on both ends, it's in the abatement side of it, and it's in the supplemental. So we had to abate we assessed the wrong owner. So we had to abate that wrong owner and then supplement the new owner, the correct owner. So that's why that number was a larger account. So that's why that number was like that. It's typically not that much.
Question, so if the mill rate were to be 14.8, so is that like a 7.5% increase from last year?
So, well, last year was 1384. So depending on. Yep.
Any other thoughts or comments from the board? So Selectman Lowell's comment, was that favorable for the 1482 mill rate? Or?
Yeah.
Ethan, any other thoughts?
Inclined to show it.
Selectman Thompson at the end.
My only hesitation is the cost of annual meeting. Honestly, I mean, for 2 cents. The cost that we incur when we have to hold a special town meeting. Sorry, I said annual, didn't I? I meant special.
They
There's
had to move some extra out.
Yeah, if we find ourselves in the position where we need to move additional funds, we're gonna have to hold a special town meeting and that costs money.
So the 1483 mill rate brings it up to 23,330, which is a cent more increase. Is that what you're suggesting, Bethany?
No, what I was indicating was there's only 2 cents difference if we bring it up to that 28 for the overlay. And it was just a thought that I was having, so I needed to voice it. I needed to vocalize it.
Matt, technically, you don't need a vote from the board because you set the mill rate.
Right.
You're just here to
Our-
listen to us for feedback.
Our recommendations would be somewhere between the 23,000 and the, and the normal 28,000. Because whatever else we don't use next year, you can roll it over. Those tree growth penalties will be available for you guys to roll over next year's budget cycle, you know what I mean, and use. So we got to kind of still operate it like normal in case there is something that does pop up.
I think my only comment is I think they both make very valid points.
Yep, I agree.
And so just keeping that in mind, supplemental rate. Great. Any final comments, Ethan? Okay. Thank you for all the information.
All right.
And would you need anything more from us?
Usually they do a recommendation of one of the two,
Okay, so
and then we just.
do you want to do the 1483? Or 23,330 or?
You said that your recommendation was the 23,330, correct? Or
Or
the
the
28.
Yeah, and I understand there's been a huge budget increases, and
Yeah.
this is gonna be a good jump, a substantial jump in people's taxes, so I'm comfortable with the 23,300 if we wanna keep it, as
Okay.
less impact on everybody, that's absolutely fine. We should do it from there.
You want a motion to that effect?
He doesn't need it.
No, he doesn't need it, but he said something about previous years. That's what had been done.
Yeah, usually somebody does a recommendation, and, we
In the form of a
recommend.
motion.
Yep.
Thank
Okay.
you. That's what I was double checking.
Yep, sorry.
I make a motion to go with the recommendation of the mill rate of 1483 with the $23,330.15 in overlay.
Selectman Thompson's motion.
Second.
All seconds. Any other comments? All those in favor? And that's unanimous.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
You can also see the insert for the county tax. Increased to 714,605. Moving on to number 4, we need to approve the July 6 meetings.
Madam Chair, make a motion to approve the annual organizational meeting minutes from July 6, 2021.
Ethan's motion, Shelley seconds. Comments, corrections, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Now the regular meeting.
Madam Chair, make a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes from July 6, 2021. Any additions or corrections?
Second. Ethan's motion and Shelley seconds. Any comments, corrections? Yes, Shelley.
So
I just noticed that, looking at the agenda, should it follow through like with any discussion? I mean, it gets a little bit confusing with the appointment. And then it was amended, but it doesn't really say, it's saying the same thing as one. It was for Thomas Hagan to the sewer commission, and then the term, and then there was a second, and then it was amended. It just doesn't explain.
You want the amendment for,
Yeah, just because
for my abstention to be in.
Oh, is that what that
It
was
was
for
what I
the
just got.
amendment?
Yeah, there were
Okay.
two of them.
I think that's kind of the point,
Thanks
is
for-
that the record's not clear as to why we
Right,
had
I
one
just
vote
looked at it,
and
I
it
got
turned
more
into something
confused.
else.
Right. And then the other thing is too, where we had an appointment for Wes Dugan for the school board,
Yeah.
and it was notated that he didn't need to. So I just want to make sure that our agenda is matching our minutes, so if you want, I don't know if we can do an addendum, an amendment to that, just notating those two different things.
Right, 'cause Wes was elected, he did not need to be appointed.
Right.
Thank you, Shelley. Any other suggested corrections or comments? All those in favor? Hearing that's unanimous. Number 4, moving on to public to speak on a non-agenda item.
That's me.
Okay, if you could just identify yourself and,
My name is Ned Allison. I live at 113 Stratton Road, backside of Haley Pond. Some of you are familiar with my grievance, which I've been on for well over 30 years on this grievance. I've lived on Haley Pond as a summer resident and semi-year-round resident since I was 6 years old. I know the pond very, very well. In the last 30 years, until today, still, the pond level fluctuation is enormously upsetting, not just for me as a landowner, a shorefront owner, but for other people. But it's even more serious for the wildlife and the environment. In the last week, well, I'll put it this way. Just before the 4th of July, the pond was 2 inches below, which I know to be the high water level, which is when the gate is shut, the sluice gate, water will then flow over it. And if there's a threat of rain, it's opened a bit. If there's threat of torrential rain, it's open even more. The pond was beautiful a week and a half ago. And in the last week, it's dropped 13 inches. I spoke to Manager Roach Friday morning about it. And Friday at 8 o'clock in the evening, sitting down to read a book, my wife told me that our water was no longer running because the pond had sunk below the foot valve. This is total mismanagement, a very important piece of the pristine water system that Rangeley has. 30 years ago, we wrote a letter that everybody around the pond signed. Unfortunately, most of those people are now passed away. It talked about loons not being able to nest, fish not being able to spawn because the streams were closed up because the water was so low. Reeds would come up and silt and leaves would dam up those streams. It's been, as I was telling Manager Roach, that a lot of people go to bed who are from away and think, oh, I've got Rangeley, I'm so lucky, it's such a beautiful place. I go to bed going, oh my God, what's happening with the water level in my pond? Because it's an eyesore. I pay waterfront taxes and I have a mud flat all along my shoreline. And as Mr. Savage knows and other people know, I've been on this for a long time and I've got absolutely no satisfaction, which is proved by the last week, as well as exactly a year ago, which just by the 4th of July, the pond was in beautiful, pristine shape. And all of a sudden, they didn't just open the gate a little bit the way they did this year, they opened it a lot. The pond dropped in no time flat, and we had a drought for the rest of the summer. Mismanagement of that gate has been predominant, and it needs to be changed. The water commission, the people who run that gate need to know the water table. They need to know how much water is flowing into the pond from the streams and how much is flowing out at the sluice gate. They've got to know what weather patterns. A number of years ago, we saw a huge hurricane coming up from the south that covered a third of the eastern seaboard. It was a very wet September before that, and they forgot to open the gate. And the whole, Main Street started to flood, sandbagging occurred. Dogs and ducks were swimming on my front lawn. Got to have a much better idea of not just the forecast, but again, water coming in, water flowing out, and more importantly, the correct water level of that pond. And if you go and you look and see some of those old big rocks that are sticking out and have been for 100+ years, you can see that black line, which is the high water mark for the first 30 years of my life. In the last 30 years, it's been up and down and up and down. Hence is why I'm here. And if anybody wants to discuss it and figure out what to do, I have my ideas, which is sit down with the people, the whole group in charge of gate. The water department has different employees. They have different keys. They have keys. They control it, but they have to know what's going on. There you have it. It's a simple situation. I have people who come down my driveway on a regular basis and they shake their, they have no idea where Haley Pond is going to be. Nor do I.
So I'll defer to Joe. You've had, Mr. Allison has had discussions with you. So is it that one sluice gate that's the outlet for Haley Pond?
I believe that's the only outlet, yes. There is a dam there, and we did speak Friday, we spoke again today, and I did speak with Keith Friday afternoon, and said it's something I wanted to talk with him about it more detail. So things that I need to figure out is, what is the purpose of it? Who built it? Was the Army Corps of Engineers? Are there any directives in there? Are there any other directives? There are environmental concerns that we need to think about in terms of DEP and so forth. So Keith and I have talked about those briefly. And I intend to take it up in more detail going forward. And I do intend to go out and look at this site. I haven't seen it from that end. So I do intend to do that as I. So we need a lot of rain before that gate should be opened. Water. It does take long, but it takes a lot less time to empty that pond. It's not a big body of water.
So Ethan, is the water district?
No, the sewer
Involved?
department, the public sewer department is in charge of, has been since Stretching was in charge.
Okay.
But I would recommend Joe just do what he's gonna do.
Yeah.
Dig into it before we give any kind of answer. Just know that we're taking your concern seriously, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, thank you. And thank you for reaching out to the town manager.
I remember him when he was a little kid.
All right. Any other public to speak on a non-agenda, Mark?
I had some unanswered questions about some of the discussions that came up during the budget committee process. And I listed them, and I'm not expecting any answers or action tonight. I just take this opportunity to enter this into the record and have you folks look at them at your convenience. And if there's any information when you're done looking into it, you can share with me. I appreciate it. And can I get a copy of that 5 or 6 page thing Matt Caldwell gave you folks before the end of the meeting there for my reporting for the Highlander?
I'll give you this one, but it's got my notes.
Yeah, I don't want one with the notes.
Actually,
You'll need that
keep
one.
Yeah, you can have the notes.
Joe, did you get a copy of the book?
I did.
Okay.
So does the board want to table it first? Okay, so let's,
Give us a chance to look through it.
okay, so just, yep, we'll discuss it in more detail at our next meeting. Thank you, Mark. Any other public to speak? Okay, moving on. There are no board and committee reports. Consent items. It seems that the RFA outdoor concert series permit that we had previously approved did not include street closures. So what they're looking for is just to just amend what we previously approved to allow for road closures for the dates already that have already been approved. And need a motion for that, correct, Joe?
Yes, please.
You know, we need a motion for the date you authorized just today that already occurred on retro.
Probably wouldn't hurt.
Madam Chair, make a motion to this amendment,
Yeah, to amend, yeah.
to amend the RFA's permit for the concert series to include Pond Street closure on the dates of 7/19, 7/26, 8/9, 8/16, and 8/23.
It's a motion. Second. Shelley seconds. Comments? Questions? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Next up, airport reserve account transfers. So we've got a couple of different sections of information. So this first is what Joe had discussed at the last meeting that he didn't have available to us, the breakdown of the 5 different reserve accounts that the 175,000 is going to be divvied up in. So that's the first handout. The second one is from the Office of the Finance Director, and it is the disclosure regarding the Chick Hill funds in the amount of $631,994.43 that was placed into the airport reserve account. Breakdown of what has been allocated out of that 631,000, but anybody have any questions to generate some discussion? Go ahead, Jill.
All right, so when the AWS was purchased, that actually comes out of the airport reserve, correct? For the 131,650?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that.
Or anything expense for the airport. I guess I'm just confused on the total amount that was put, that was, I don't want to call it a fourth account. I want to call it the Chick Hill money, revenue, Chick Hill revenue, because that was revenue that we got from Chick Hill. And I guess I don't understand with on the second page of the memo, how the amounts are, and how, I mean, was everything approved? I mean, because if I see the AWOS for the weather system for 131,650, I would think that that would be allowed to come out of that 150 that the FAA gives the airport each. I guess,
I do have an explanation for that.
you know.
Yeah.
So I'm confused of how now we're like running out of money, and I just don't know how it happened, I guess. So,
what I can explain regarding the AWAS purchase was, that was presented to the board in two possible scenarios. This is the weather, system for the airport. I don't know how else to explain it.
It's automated weather system for the pilots.
Okay. It needed to be replaced. It wasn't functioning. The airport was closed at the time. In order to use the $150,000 in entitlement money, it needs to go through the FAA process. So it's very specific. It has to be put out to bid. There's and that projected cost was $300,000 to go through. I needed to jog my memory, so I don't have this kind of memory. I viewed the meeting. And so the other alternative was to just outright purchase the AWAS system out of the reserve account and not go through the FAA process. And that was roughly 131,000. Yeah. So that was the discussion. It was either, use 300,000 and, maybe get it done in a year, or use reserve funds and get the project done sooner.
so when you say reserve funds, you mean the Chick-fil-A money?
I don't know.
No, we didn't spend the
Okay.
check on that.
We didn't spend the chicken money.
Okay.
So I guess following up on Ethan's comment, that $631,994.43 is the Chick-fil money that is sitting in the reserve account.
And there's been no other expenses come out of that.
No, actually, there's an error on here. The agent agreement payment for $26,596.80.
Yeah.
There's an actual, I remember this specifically, that was supposed to come out of the general reserve, not the airport reserve. It's in the meeting minutes for November 18th, 2019. So that is incorrect. So this Chick-fil money, I don't know why. I think Shelley raised why the term force accounts being used.
Right.
That was, sorry. So in reading this, the first line, it confuses the whole situation. It looks like there is only $105,920 in the airport reserve. And then then it goes on to use language called force account, but I thought we had established that money that was in that account was not force account money.
That's
The money that Chick-fil earns is not force account money.
That's correct.
Okay,
So and then on top of that,
but this total is including this 496,000, is that what I'm? See, this top line says the force account was 631,000, and then in the next line down, it says the sale of town materials gives you those two. It says the total is that 496. Is that 631 including that 496? Is that what I'm understanding? Sorry, did I just totally confuse the whole thing?
No, I'm just.
No, I think
This memo is confusing.
so is it basically two credit, right, versus.
The total, all right, so the total that was put into this account of Chick Hill money was 631,994.43. That they thought was force account, but the FAA said no.
No.
It is unrestricted funds, and that's.
So how do we?
So
end up
can
with
I
400?
follow up on that then and ask why that is still unclear?
Well, but
Why it is still being identified as force account and why it is still being identified as amounts that are not, amounts that must remain in the airport reserve. I thought that was made clear, but,
yeah, I think,
okay,
well,
sorry, I'm just trying to quit.
Well, on top of what I have to say, if 631,994.43 was what we got from Chick Hill, then why does the second line after the first
Okay.
paragraph say that the amount that we could move from Chick Hill is 496,570.50?
nothing's been allocated by the Board of Selectmen, correct?
No, but I mean, we've had many discussions about this money and it was sitting here in the reserve until we were gonna move it, so I mean, it's time to move it, but we never spent it.
Yeah, make a
Until
motion.
this year.
Well, I'd make a motion, but if you're saying 631,994.43 was the Chick Hill money, why is there only 496,571 to move? I'm not gonna move it unless we figure out what happened to that other chunk.
It's, yes, Joe,
Madam Chair, I would recommend tabling this discussion to the next meeting.
I'm tired of tabling it. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna be really blunt.
I agree with you.
I've got a memo here from November 8th, 2019 in our Board of Selectmen packets that indicates the total received from the force account is 631,994.43, which matches this number here. The FAA said there is no force account. We have a letter dated January 16, 2020. No force account. These are unrestricted funds. They're not airport revenue.
So where's the $135,000 discrepancy? It's got something.
Keith,
I probably can't help this, I'm trying to simplify it. So as I look at it, you mentioned the 631 and then you mentioned the 400 and change. So the 400 and change came from the separate deal through Mr. McDougal after the fact. That was the additional funds we were able to achieve.
So that's in addition,
That's in
I'm so
addition.
sorry.
So in the total
I
account, it was over
apologize.
$1 million. So then you go down to this document and you show the expenditures of, obviously with the correction that Cindy mentioned with the agent agreement. You subtract that 376, very bottom line says you have currently right now, you have $727,000 total and change in that budgetary grouping to move into these reserve accounts.
the 496,571.50 never was put into the reserve account. That was put into the general fund.
So that would be totally wrong. I mean, so obviously, but that's how I get the whole number though. That's how it should have been, because you had two amounts. You had a very large amount that was the additional agreement with the FAA. And then you have the additional money that came with Shane, which should have been $1 million, roughly that million. That's my memory. It could very well be, could be misspeaking, but I hope I'm not. Which would give you that bottom airport reserve number on that document.
Yes, Joe.
Madam Chair, my main goal for sharing this information, or providing this information to the board, was to give you a level of confidence to feel that there's enough money in there to disperse it to the reserve accounts.
Well, I think we also asked for additional information as to, because we've had the public ask, what's, you know, what's going to, what's the town going to do with this money? It's, and it's not pleasant.
It's fine to allocate this 175,000 for what Joe is recommending, but I'd rather see every bit of accounted for money that that is attributed to the sale of material from chip hill moved to the general reserve first. So we aren't misstepping and doing all this, getting confused about it. Get the whole thing moved over to where it goes. Start allocating all this stuff. The big chunk, all of it. It's supposed to, it's supposed to not
Put
be
it
in
in
there.
the general. Put it in the.
Well, we keep taking chunks out of the airport reserve, and we're gonna go back and backtrack and say, well, was that a piece of the town material that we meant to take out the whole time? We left it in there for a while, and it's time for it to come out, so we need the exact large.
Well, I think basically, the only thing we have voted on specifically for these, for the Chick Hill money is 175,000. So the other funds were airport reserve funds. So the so it'd be the 631,994.43 as the total that was placed in the airport reserve. We have voted to allocate 175,000 to these, and the voters have approved. The 100, you know, how the breakdown of the reserves. We've been discussing this for a year now.
Yeah, the only reason we were leaving it in there was to make sure that all the invoices were paid in case anything actually came up. And
Right.
if that's not an issue anymore, that all that money can come out.
Then it should go on to the regular account. Motion.
I need a number, because that's where we get confused.
Right,
The number
that's,
is-
we're not sure what number it is,
What?
because is that a total in addition to that? total?
Yes, Mark.
And just, if, say you were gonna transfer that 631,000 out of the airport reserve into the general fund, which you've been discussing. The way that vote went on the 175, can you then take that 175 of the general fund, or do you need to take it out of the 631,000 first and then transfer the balance into the general fund? I'm just wondering the way that was worded in the town warrant and the vote, which it's all gonna end up out of the airport
Right,
fund,
right.
but do you need to do it in 2 steps, or can you reallocate it from the
Well, that's
general
that's
fund if
what
you
I,
put it all in there?
that's what I would ask.
Yeah.
Joe and
So,
Mr. Langsdorff possibly, because he happens to be here.
so, yeah, the order, so we, what, how would that need to look?
So once funds manager go to the general fund, the only way they come back out is by town meeting vote. The only way they can really get into the general fund is to come into an operating account first and then lapse to surplus at the end of the fiscal year. So that's how they can get from where they're at to the general fund. Can they go to a general reserve by vote? Yes. So if you voted to transfer them, kind of like we talked about in the budget process, to these reserves that I listed, instead of use those reserves, use the general reserve first. But the only way they go to the general fund is if they go to an operating account and lapse the surplus. And if you wanted access to it, it would be by town meeting vote.
Question for you.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, so, the general reserve, so, where that money from the sale of the Chick Hill materials, when the FAA said, you know, this isn't airport money, this is inhabitants of the town of Rangeley's money, which account should have that have been deposited in at that time?
That's an interesting question.
A general reserve?
I think at that point in time, it was thought that it was going to be used for the project.
Right, but
That's why it
that
was-
was clarified quite a while ago that it wasn't. So, given that, would the general reserve be the right account to
Because that way it could be allocated out of the general reserve to these other reserve accounts.
Yeah.
If the 631 is transferred over to the general reserve.
Right, but if they use any funds for that, then it has to go to the voters.
If it goes to the general fund, which is
Sorry,
But not the.
fund,
general
yes,
reserve.
reserve, no, we control reserve.
correct.
So reserves to reserves, that is, that's, so to transfer to the general reserve would make. the most-
Unless the reserve amount, not to complicate it, Madam Chair, but unless the amount in a reserve was raised by town meeting or appropriated by town meeting for a
Right.
specific purpose.
Exactly,
then
those
it's
are
only town
restricted
meeting.
or assigned funds, which these are not, right, they're not.
Might be somebody.
So reserve to reserve, we could just make the one motion to move the 631,994.43 to the general reserve and then allocate the 175 out of the general reserve to the respective accounts.
So if we move that 631,994, does that mean that the airport reserve is like a balance of about like 95.5? Where it says the balance of the airport reserve is 7,794.
I mean, I think it's.
Okay.
Questions?
I think, Madam Chair, before, if we have a treasurer chime in on this, I would like that before you. So it's just still there. Madam Chair.
Blue Lake Shoulders money. So that was for fixing the estuaries. So that came out of the airport reserve, which it should have, not the lower one, because that was to widen those estuaries that were more.
Hi. You guys have a question?
Yeah, just things, the agent agreement payment for 26,596.80. The minutes reflect that came out of the general reserve and not out of the airport reserve.
I have to look back, I don't know.
The and there's some clarifying questions regarding the 631,994.43 and the 496,571.50. What the 496,571.50 reflects. Was that?
Yeah, I want basically the nuts and bolts. Which one's the actual figure for the dirt money?
Okay, so some of the stuff that we got in, like for the taxi lane, so you had a total amount, that was what you were getting for the dirt, but then they subtracted the taxi lane amount, so the 6 was the total, but the other numbers are minus the actual what came out of it.
So the 6.
So the actual number that's in there right now is $7,727,494.15.
That's the entire airport reserve.
Entire airport reserve, and the 26,000 did come out of the airport reserve. Because that's what.
Okay. So you're saying the taxi lane was spent out of the dirt money, that's what it was.
Yes.
So 631,994.43. You subtract 121, almost 122,000 from that. to get us closer to this 496
Yes.
figure. And what's the rest of it?
I don't know.
Okay, so but all the stuff's paid and the remaining balance, that's,
Yes, the only thing that's not, was the 175,000, which we're waiting for the motion. And then the discussion was anything that, comes from the union contract, that was to be taken from them.
so Joe, if we move that into the general reserve, can we still pay those bills that way? What she's talking about out of the general reserve? Would we,
The 175,000.
And what we were talking about, Rebecca, if I may, Madam Chair,
Sure.
before you came in the room, is what steps should we take to track that money as we spend it? One of the proposals was, should we take the entire available amount out of the airport reserve, move it into the general reserve, and then disperse it to the individual reserves? When we started getting into that, I said, I like that. It's generally what we were talking about, Madam Chair?
Yeah, just the general, as far as the proper steps for the 175, if that, can we, I think you've already mentioned, that all 5 can be taken out of one, maybe one motion.
Right.
And then
The taxi lane wasn't part of the runway extension project. So the omnibus money couldn't be used for that. The feds didn't pay for that.
well, I'm in favor of ending the discussion about all of this, put this close to 500 grand somewhere else where it can be used, and we don't have to talk about it anymore except for how we expend the town tax. Cindy?
oh, yes, sorry, Joe.
Madam Chair, I'd like to have the treasurer clarify the available amount to be transferred.
So what's available, and you can add the 175,000 to this. It would be the $349,606.91 if you added the 175,000 back into it. That's what's available to be transferred.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was just going by where it said 496, 571, which can't be moved, so I thought it could be moved.
If you go to the second page, I did a breakdown.
Okay, no, I'm just saying where I was coming from. Number.
We've only voted to allocate the 175,000 out of the 631, and the taxi lane, I do remember that discussion, it was airport reserve. So I guess, if you could explain the 376,409, what could be paid from force account? What does that mean at the top of the second page?
So you have force account, which has to stay in the reserve, and then you have in kind. So the force account, because I know you guys want to move as much as possible. So all those things can be considered, they all come out of their airport reserve. But if you want to get technical, all those things can be considered to be expended from the force account money.
So why is there force account?
I thought we created a force account because we thought that the dirt money had to be used for something specific, and when the FAA said it didn't have to be used for something specific, the force account was no longer a force account. Is that correct?
The in-kind money that could have been transferred, the force account could not. So before the project became 100% funded, we were looking at the 5%, our 5% to be used from force accounts. So the FAA made an agreement that they would still pay the town of Rangeley that agreement amount for the force account, but it had to stay in the airport reserve. And then we had a engineer came and did a contract, and then did another agreement for in-kind, same materials, just another word, for a different amount. That amount, the FAA originally said had to stay in the airport reserve, but then they came back later and said that could be moved.
I don't think we ever received anything from the FAA indicating that those funds were restricted. We've got this letter from January 16th, 2020. Says the FAA, New England Region Airports Division has received the town's inquiry about the conditions associated with our office's approval of force account work on subject reference project. Specifically, you inquired about the validity of the requirement to consider all excess funds associated with payment to the sponsor, the town, of the provided materials as airport revenue. Upon review of your inquiry and consideration of the source material being furnished, you are correct, reimbursing to you a sponsor for materials is not owed or considered airport property. It should not be considered airport revenue, which goes back to their reference to force account.
That was for the contract amount that she did with it.
That's not what we asked them.
We can get a letter from FAA, that's fine, to clarify that.
I think the board would probably appreciate that, because that's not the question that was asked to the FAA. It was for the entire, amount of the materials. You had given us a breakdown in our November 18th, 2019 meeting, which showed
I may while you're looking.
sure. So the memo that was in our Board of Selectmen packets on 11/18/19 indicated two different amounts. The total received from force account 631,994.43, and then the other build out materials, which was 415,968. Which was put into the general reserve fund is what I have noted here. And so the board's question was about those restricted funds, that 631,994.43 was what we asked the FAA about. Since, the force, their initial intent of the force account was no longer needed since it's 100% funded.
We still had to honor that contract, right? With certain price of materials at that time. So technically,
I
we did.
can get a letter from Barry Hammer.
If you just want, I'll give this letter to you, Joe, from Barry Hammer.
Sure.
And I can just follow up with him.
So should we hold off on the?
All right, so we're not gonna move any money until we get a letter from Baker.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. Lake Road. Payment. To your Guardian Sons. Invoice here. $76,953.50. So right to you, Joe, all set to pay?
All set to pay, Madam Chair.
Alright, we need a motion.
Shelley's turn.
Quick question, Shelley.
So on this, does that include the change orders that? You said something about last meeting about a couple culverts and having to add them and
Very good question, Madam Chair. The answer to the question is no, it does not include change orders. Change orders are still pending. You will see them reflected in the next pay rate,
That was in your memo, right?
possibly. I don't know. But it's a good question. The paper, they're still working on paperwork, Madam Chair, and they'll have it for the next pay rate.
Do you have a question, Sean? Yeah.
So which is the amount? Because I see here that it's highlighted, current amount, 276,953.50. And then it looks like this request for payment detail is 291,530.
Another excellent question, Madam Chair. So 291,530 is what's been accrued to date, minus, so if you subtract retainage from that, which is 14,576.50, it should equal 276,953.50. So it's the amount that has taken place to date minus the retainage that the town holds on to.
So this highlighted is what we're approving to be paid today.
Correct, that's the current amount due.
Need a motion?
Make a motion to authorize payment of pay request for the signing on the Loon Lake Road project in the amount of $276,953.50.
Sean's motion and Ethna seconds. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Unpaid sewer charges percentage to match delinquent tax percentage, so this is a question from Selectman Lowell at our prior meeting regarding the article in the annual town warrant, which indicated a late fee of 7%. Joe has verified that we need to conform with code.
So there's no motion that needs to be done, or do you need a motion?
I think a motion would be in order, Madam Chair.
This was Shelley's question, right?
I just have a quick question.
Yes,
and
go
I'm so
ahead.
sorry. Doesn't the sewer commission handle rates and everything, yada, yada? Should it be them who makes this motion and makes this change? Just asking.
I think the motion, Madam Chair, would be to recognize that to reflect what the board did with the uncollected tax, exactly.
Right.
To reflect, this code does say that automatically, it's the same percentage, would be reflected by a motion.
All right, embrace myself.
Still in that sort of, that the sewer commission sets and rates throughout.
But it corrects our article.
It corrects our article and our warrant.
And then I would like a follow-up vote to go to the sewer commission one, because they do handle all, by ordinance, they handle fees.
Okay.
For the sewer bill.
So I guess we notate it. And I request that the sewer commission be contacted for a vote, come to us about the error on the warrant to reflect Rangeley Town Code Section 30.11.4 regarding the interest charge.
That's our motion.
Second.
Shelley's motion, Ethna seconds. Any other discussion, comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Ethna, are you good with the request that it be sent to the sewer commission and added to their next agenda?
I would like it to be, like I said, because the ordinance is so clear that the sewer commission does set the rates. it is our clerical error, but I do believe that the sewer commission should have their time with the subject and agree that the reason we are saying it should be the same is because it was a clerical error. Does that make sense? Thank you.
I respect it. I agree, and I will make sure it's through.
So just for like bookkeeping purposes, at their meeting, when they get ready to do their budgets, should they be having in their minutes somewhere that they have, this is what the rate's gonna be in order for?
We'll have to look at
go
that
on?
and move forward after this. But the years past, obviously, I have that quite as quite as informative to them as they should be with the budget. Also, we discuss by request, but it isn't very detailed. So moving forward, I'll correct that.
Moving on to the airport T hangar lease. We need to authorize a consent to occupy. And we need motion.
So moved.
But you have to have a lease number.
It says, lease number 9, but then it says. Okay, lease hanger.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to give consent to occupy under lease T hangar lease number L01 concerning the parcel of land associated with hangar number 9. It's the municipal airfield, regional name.
Second.
Ethan's motion and Ethna seconds. Questions, comments? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Correspondence, Gary, I'd like to make this adjustment to the agenda today. We did get some correspondence that was received today. It is a letter from Chris Philbrick, who is, his family moved to the Rangeley area a couple of years ago. So he writes, Dear Cynthia, on July 15th, I had the opportunity to visit the town office to register personal property. I wanted to let you know the customer service I received was superb in every respect. In preparation for this visit, I called the town office on Tuesday and had the pleasure of speaking with Rebecca Carmichael Austin. After explaining that Tammy and I had recently sold our home in Virginia, now live full-time in Adamstown, I asked for assistance in registering a boat and trailer. Rebecca provided the relevant information without missing a beat, asked me if I was also in search of information on vehicle and voter registration. I was pleasantly surprised and impressed that she anticipated my follow-up questions without any prodding on my part. After collecting the necessary paperwork, I arrived at the town office and was warmly greeted by Marty Belt. I explained my purpose, and without hesitation, Marty sprang into action and completed the required transactions. Despite the new routine nature of these tasks, Marty was engaging and professional in every respect. I was impressed by her ability to focus on her task while simultaneously answering my questions. I suspect a lot of people are quick to tell you when things go wrong during encounters with town employees. I wanted to report my favorable comments and ask that you pass on my sincere appreciation for Rebecca and Marty for their exceptional professionalism, assistance, and customer service. Chris Philbrick, Adamstown Township. Moving on to old business, broadband update. Give it to Joe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief update. Last time we met with the surrounding plantations at the quarterly meeting. We talked about responding to an RFI for Connect Maine as the first step, very first step in a grant through NTIA for broadband in the region. And as you see in your packets, we've been moved to the next step. So we're going to be part of the application process. So doesn't mean we've been approved, but we are through the first round. And meanwhile, the second part of that update, which is not in there, is we're continuing, the delegates are continuing to work on the Plan B. We've worked with Kristen Collins and Steve. Continue to work on having the contingency plan in place, which would be interlocal agreement of some nature. operation and funding it ourselves, or a portion of it ourselves. So we're still working on that, in case the NTI doesn't work out.
Yes,
Can I say
Steve
something about
Steve
that?
Langsdorff.
Yes, nice to see everyone, thank you. So I sort of mentioned also a little bit about the broadband. Our firm has been heavily gearing up on that issue. We just established the first municipal broadband practice group that we know of in New England. So Christian specifically wanted me to ask about how you're working with this, and we brought in also a consultant who's working with us, who was the retired director of Connect Me, which is the rural broadband authority. So we thought, while you guys are still in this preliminary step, at some point relatively soon, we should have some follow-up discussions about some of the things that we've been doing and where you're going. And there's a lot of interest. We're responding to some other RFQs, and this is a very, very expanding, unclear where everything's going with this, but we're doing our best. We put in kind of a consolidation of our energy and telecommunications, municipal and business practices together, have this specialized, subgroup, and there's a tremendous amount of interest, as you can imagine. So Kristen wanted me to mention something so that while you're in these alternative plannings, we can make sure you're steering in the right direction, the best direction for the town. This is a big deal, as you know.
Right. Thank you, Steve. All right, visiting the remote participation policy first reading, making it official in our minutes that the first reading has happened. Are there any other follow-up questions or comments from the board? We've got an hour and a half to ponder it. First reading. It's on record. Need a motion for the first reading?
I don't believe your policy requires it. Meaning your policy adoption policy.
Last bit of old business is the front office vacancy stipends, which you've got a summary in your packets, and I'll turn this over to Joe as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the original intent was to allow the stipends to take place until we fill the front office vacancy. The one thing that's changed in that dynamic is that we've appointed full-time clerk. So she's taking up that wage that was in the budget. Before, it was kind of the other way around. The town clerk position, which was vacant, the people were split in 3 ways. Now that that position is filled, I'm looking for authorization to take the stipends from the vacant position, which is finance assistant or office assistant, customer service. Just wanted there to be a clear trail of that, make sure you're on board with it, make sure the auditor can find out if we're looking through the warrants.
So you need a motion to approve the stipends from the office assistant line item.
Correct.
Consider that a motion.
Second.
Any other, yes, no,
Sorry.
discussion.
I just had a couple of clarifying questions, because this is new to me. I just didn't know, how many other towns offer this when there's vacancies in their front office?
I don't know offhand.
Okay.
I do know, Madam Chair, that it's been customary arrangement to offer those.
And my second question, the job descriptions for these positions, do they indicate additional duties as responsibilities?
I believe most of our job descriptions, Madam Chair, if not all of them, say other duties as directed.
Thank you.
I
Just
wouldn't
wanted to
make that,
double check.
I wouldn't make that broad statement about the union contract, but it's certainly within our union job. I would say that it's in there.
Yes, Mark.
Has there been any interest in this office assistant position?
There has been some interest, Madam Chair. We've received a few responses. I'd have to ask Tracy if she's out.
Have you interviewed anybody?
We have had one interview,
So the deadline is come and gone for response.
We've made the position open until filled. That's how I posted, actually posted all that.
Any other discussion before a vote? All those in favor? That's unanimous. New business, we've got the MMA convention scheduled for September 30th and October 1st at the Augusta Civic Center. And Joe has got some notations in his handout regarding town office staff and your desire for them to attend. And why don't you go ahead and continue that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, well, in staff meeting, the last staff meeting, I asked everybody to take a look at the agenda for the MMA convention. If there are things in there that they're interested in, I encourage them to go. I'm trying to balance that with whether we keep the front office open or not. That's kind of the way I approached it, and I wanted to make the board aware of that. I certainly feel very strongly about professional development, and if I hear back from folks find value in both days, I will most likely come back to you and ask for authorization to close the front office for this couple of days. Second item, I just wanted the board to be aware that unless you object, I intend to register all of you. The price is the same whether you go for one day or both days. So I would plan on registering folks to meet the board, the entire select board for the convention.
So when do you need to know, is there a refund if you pay for our attendance?
I think within the city, yeah, if it's out, it's within a certain number of days now, and I think it's 3 days. I'll check on that.
Okay,
I
yeah,
think we've got enough wiggle room at this
Yeah.
point.
that would be great, because if something comes up and folks know that they have an obvious conflict, pay for that. Yes,
Mention something else, like, just along the lines of professional development, every year we invite all of our clients to meet, including Rangeley. We do, this year it's on October 7th, we do a full day employment law seminar, which people have historically come from the town before, but it's open to as many people as want. We charge a small amount, like $90 something, but it's a full day employment seminar for supervisors, for dealing with employees and all employment law issues. So I know you probably, I'm sure you get the invitation, but I thought I'd mention it also, that you can send as many people as you want. It's good for supervisors, basically dealing with employment, human rights issues, discrimination, sexual harassment, all the things that you would expect. So we do offer that. It's October 7th this year.
thank you, Steve. And you hold that in your Portland office?
We actually do it not at the office, but at the Doubletree Hotel across from the mall.
Next, under new business, tax assessor RFP, we had one response from RJD Appraisal. And Joe has a couple of comments on that.
I do, Madam Chair. I was looking at the approved budget for the upcoming year. This submission is a little higher than that. I'm perfectly willing to talk with Rob about whether we can negotiate, if that's what you'd like me to do.
And save us money?
I mean, I can try it.
Go ahead. Shelley.
So just a couple questions that I had is like, how many days a week are they here? I thought we had them here 3 days a week.
No, not typically, no.
No.
It's 2 usually. Sometimes less, sometimes more. I know recently, in the last month or so, they've been here more than that, trying to get everything wrapped up. Captured.
Right. And do other towns have less coverage is one of my other questions. On the days that they have here versus. like bigger towns. stuff like that.
That varies from town to town. Matt, if he's still in the building, will probably give more information on that.
Yeah, because they cover a lot of towns, so I just didn't know
They do. And that
for
may
our
be,
size, is it necessary
For the 2 days, I think.
for the 2 days?
I would say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I would. There's a lot of value here. There's a lot of building permits that have been done in the last year, so it's busy. I wouldn't want to be much less than that. However, that is one of the things I can talk with Ron about on the phone tomorrow. But I wouldn't want to be much less than that.
Mark,
Seeing as they made the tax commitment and voted on the tax commitment tonight, or had a recommendation from the board to choose one, do you know how long the process is for new tax information would be available? Because I know like right now, the real estate market's quite active, and the proration of taxes is an issue. Because you don't have current data to work with, so you're hopeful that the two parties can come to an agreement after the closing, which it doesn't always turn out that way, and it gets messy. So I was just curious if, when you're speaking with Matt, if you could find out from him how long till that information would be available.
so Joe, what do you need from the board as far as do you need authorization to negotiate?
Yes. If that's a pleasure, you could, the board could accept it at this rate. It's 3,000 more than what we budgeted. There are some other incidental items in that account, as I recall, so I think the total account would cover this, but then the incidental items would put it over. So.
By all means, try to get us the budget.
Right.
Go ahead.
How much of an increase over last year's is this? I know I should know that. because I was in the budget.
3,000. Sorry,
No, that's fine.
I think it's 3,000 more, Madam Chair.
So what, we're over?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So someone,
I make a motion for Joe Roach to enter into negotiations with RJD Appraisal, Rob Duplessis, coming under budget. At budget.
Second.
it's a motion in seconds. Any other discussion, comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Moving into the town manager report. We've got Bailey Beers, official licensed CEO. Big congratulations to her.
Nice work, Kate.
Yeah. She was okay with me putting that in your notes. I asked her before I did it. And I believe she deserves some recognition for that. Amidst a year with a lot of building permits and a lot of people calling at her door and calling on the phone, she managed to do all those state tests. There were several of them that she had to pass: shoreline zoning, legal issue, et cetera, building code, energy code. I wanted to make sure that she was recognized for that.
Give her our congratulations. And moving on to you see the department head updates. We have submissions from the fire department and the police department. And then we move into the calendar. So the tax acquired property bid opening will be August 2nd during the selectmen's meeting, is what Joe let me know. So forward to that. And then Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife goose presentation is also scheduled for August 2nd. And who will be here from Inland Fisheries, Joe?
So Sarah, she's coordinating it, and she's got an expert. I'll be honest with you, Madam Chair, I can't remember his name. it's not Mr. Halsey, it's someone else that works with Sarah in the field on goose issues. She had spoken with him. They, originally when I talked to them, I said, can you come on the 19th? I wanted them to come up, all the issues, the iron was still a lot. And she ended up calling back last Thursday. I said, we've got a lot going on with this agenda. Can we go to this? So it's tentative at this point. She hasn't confirmed, but she's interested. Definitely, they're both interested in speaking with the board about this. I did share your concerns and why we were inviting them up. So she's got a whole spectrum of material to present to you.
Great, thank you for arranging that so quickly. Reminder, we have our fire department tour on August 16th, beginning in Aquasic at 4:30. And we have North Star orientation presentation with Director Mike Senecal on August 16th as well. Look to Joe to cover the other business, which is the Overlook sidewalk and Loon Lake Road updates.
Madam Chair, since Keith is here, Keith, do you want to give it up there?
That's fine.
Sort of brief update on each project.
All right, so, if you don't mind, I guess, Overlook sidewalk, for many of you noticed, by travel is being interrupted, we are, laying pavement. Today, obviously, we were delayed with the precipitation, tomorrow in hopes to be done with the sidewalk. However, we are in conversation, or negotiations, conversations, clarification process with the state and engineering to, look at the proper corrective action for the trench that crosses by the bid hill there, City Hill. There are unclear direction in the current bid plans or in the bid plans that there needs to be some clarification again within how much pavement needs to be removed and properly put back in. So that will come hopefully tonight while I'm sitting here with that email. That'll help us be expedient enough to allow P&D while they're here paving for M&H to finish the process. More, that'll come to you as we find out more information. Other than that, they are on schedule. They're pretty much on schedule, delayed based on basic things, but they're doing very well. Other than finishing pavement, a little bit of groundwork, we should be there within the next couple of weeks easily. Then Loon Lake Road, obviously through that first pay rack. If I recall, every driveway culvert is now in place. They'll start cross culverts this week in the roadway. And through Kevin's schedule based on Route 4 right now, we're looking at the start of the box cut, probably that second week of August. And they'll have that full crew from Madrid up here, and that will be in full motion.
Are they gonna put that white rock all on the other culverts after you pass?
Correct. So every culvert will have that stone up through once for erosion control batteries.
No, that is because they brought their own material rather than going up here.
Correct.
Rip wrap up here is a little bit difficult.
I love the look of it. So wish we could use it more often.
It doesn't look stop. That's
Absolutely.
really nice.
I just had a really quick question. I'm sorry to go back to the sidewalk, but you sped right through that. When can we expect the crosswalk that's gonna go in? And I assume that's gonna be a lit one because of the speed and.
Correct. So the town has the first set at the highway garage. That should be put in probably in the next week, realistically. The foundations are put in already.
Yeah.
We have to do a little bit of, I don't want to say fabricating, but adjustment. We were given a 16-foot pole when we acquired those sides. The plans show for a 16-foot post out of the ground, so we have to put a breakaway in. So we're looking at that little arrangement there. And then the secondary set we're working on purchases. So they'll both be lit, one at the IGA and one by the trail will both be lit crosses, push button, bi-directional, obviously, so you can see it going.
Yes, Mark.
Keith, I missed the date when you thought Vining was gonna be at full speed on the Loon Lake Road.
Based on conversations, the pay rec meeting, Kevin anticipates realistically probably that second week of August.
Second week. Thank you.
And they'll go to, on that note, they'll go to flaggers at that time, so traffic control won't be quite as
Blinky?
blanky or mundane or
Yeah.
like just prolonged.
And they'll put
They're-
it after the school interns.
Right. So the problem they have right now in their defense is people like myself that are, look at the project, we drive by with that awe moment and just like slow down. So from radar to radar, if you're delayed, that sequence carries through until that
Yeah.
last car is seen. So it delays the whole process. So with that 3-minute cycle ends up being 5, 6, 7, 8, based on
Okay.
people's caution and curiosity. So there's a big part of that.
Interesting.
Then you have it right at the school, people are trying to go here, and you've got a big line down here.
Absolutely.
Then it's like, if you don't gun us when the light turns green, it turns red before you know it.
I will make that, hopefully, well, see, we'll get through that first, but, okay, they'll be using flagging, but we'll get through that first bump relatively quickly. So.
Any other questions for Keith? Thank you. Yes.
Can the light have another color so you can see what the color is coming? Because like the people's driveways in between, it's like they don't know which way the traffic's coming
That
or
is a
going.
great question. I'll look into that ability to have essentially a forecast on either side.
Right,
What
and they cheat.
Trying to tell, which I tell people right now is obviously buying has to direct it, but you can pull into the project lane
Mhm.
and obviously sneak out, but you have to be cautious. And people understand that. I'm not gonna say that when it's closed, but it's actually there for that breakdown or birding concept. But
Right.
I'll see if they have that midpoint line for kind of to see what.
Right.
Any other questions for Keith? We've got a-
All right, who did the lines for at rate?
No, that's mine under select board.
Always,
Always, hey, no, we're still on a little late, you always jump the gun, that one's mine. It's something clever.
I'm sorry, Ethan's right. Shelley, that is not, that is not.
I thought
over
Ethan- I thought
sidewalk
Keith
for
was
Loon Lake
leaving.
Road.
Subtleties just- I'm gonna teach you a little bit about show business here.
All right,
Yeah, I
I'm
don't know.
gonna quickly move into select board communication and start to my right.
So I blinked. And there was this white thing across the road that usually you need to apply for a permit for, like some engineers to stick in. And I was like, something must have changed while I was sleeping. So you don't have to go through that anymore, so all our road projects will be a lot cheaper, right?
With that mentality, absolutely. And I will tell you that I was gone for the weekend and I came back here and had a conversation with Joe, which turned into a complete absent to me because he asked me if I painted over the weekend and I had no relevance to what he was talking about.
That's how it's done.
So I obviously went into town and saw what you have mentioned. So to answer that question, it was done privately. And tomorrow morning, we're meeting at 8 o'clock with MDOT and the property. And then we will fill you in from that point.
I know about this also.
So we will fill you in on the procedures moving forward, obviously. Parties, the state, the town, obviously understand that there's a liability now that that sign is not, that crossing is not necessarily sanctioned. So, and obviously, based on observations, I drive by, it's not conforming to the MUT. So we'll have to look at,
It's not ADA compliant, it's not,
that's not,
yeah,
And
I
I'll
mean,
say
it's
go-
not,
yeah.
it's not.
It's paint.
I recommend it not be used or painted over, because if someone does use it and there's an
Where,
accident,
Chuck?
you got a problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
so again, we'll have that based on Steve's
Oh, yeah.
Steve's conversation with Joe, and we'll have that conversation, that meeting with MDOT and the property owner, and hopefully we come to a quick resolution.
The only thing I will say is, I felt a little slighted because I thought we were doing a stroke of business the meeting before and we were headed in the direction of getting something done. Just unfortunately, government things don't happen just that quick because states own roads and rules are made. But because
I had the same thought though when we saw it.
Yeah.
Well, I
Because I'm
noticed that
wait a
the
minute.
lines are, like they're lines.
you know when I
they're
noticed
lines
it is when I saw the owner's son coming back from lunch at the deli across the street, not using it. And that's, I'm like, why isn't he, wait a minute, there never was one. And yeah, that's,
I will say that I was rather pleased, at least it followed comment for the contrast throughout the community.
Right.
It maintained the same look at least, which I'm, not to defend anything anyway.
Right.
and not to but it speaks to the point that I was trying to make about no one's slowing down for the Allen Street one. Because I haven't seen anybody slow for that one, I didn't even know it was there until I drove over it 4 times. So anyways, I guess that's enough.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, Ethan?
No, sorry.
All right, Shelley?
Okay. Our COVID money, what are we gonna do with it?
That's a very good question, Madam Chair. So, and I forgot about this. You talked about the American Rescue Plan.
Yeah.
I talked with Charlie Woodworth last week. He
Mhm.
called, and he suggested putting together a panel of Franklin County leadership, town managers, Charlie, and the county commissioners. So, first part of your question is, what is the town going to do this?
Yeah, that's
We have a
what-
certain amount of money. The second part of the question, which you didn't ask, but I want to put in there, Madam Chair, if I can, is the county has 5 million.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth it. It's not gonna cost the town arrange anything for me to go to Farmington, where we go, to talk with Dave Cota and the other folks, if they agree to do this. With Davis, if he has a retirement, get all that done, talk with the county commissioners about that pool of money. Maybe there's some project out there that they're aware of, or they're thinking about, or we come up with in a brainstorm fashion that would answer that question. Absent that, the town is allowed to do a couple of things. I know at least a couple of things with the 120. Sewer upgrades, it's one of the wastewater, and broadband. So depending on how broadband shakes out, we may or may not need that for broadband. But those two things right offhand, I know we can use that 115 and 120. I do not know the details, Madam Chair, about when we'll be receiving this money or how that happens.
So, could we use some of those funds towards, some of the things we budgeted for the laptops for the employees in case something like this happens again? Because that was due to COVID.
I can look into that. I think it's more infrastructure related, but I'm happy to check on that.
So when we say sewer, we thinking like expansion or just update?
I think it's fairly broad. I think it can be brick and mortar, and I think it also can be technology. So I don't think it's got a SCADA project. I believe that qualifies, which would tie in nicely with the climate adaptation plan that's in the works right now. So that's one option that Keith and I have talked about. The other one that's been on my mind is broadband. Is there some way, even if we use that portion of it for some portion of it for legal fees or whatever it is.
Right.
So those are two things that have crossed my mind, but I do intend to, if Charlie got a good feedback from the other managers and the county commissioners, I do intend to participate in that. Of course, it's not binding, it's just a kind of a brainstorm.
Right.
type of thing.
Also, sometimes at the county level, they like to do stuff their own.
That's what, yeah, that's fine.
County's gonna get a lot of money, so maybe we could deal with the ridiculous county taxes.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the country has, county government is much more active. In Maine, they think, when the county governments don't do much here, they're getting a lot of money,
Right.
so.
Right.
Anything else, Shelley?
No, yeah, thank you.
After anything? All right, I don't have any, yeah. All right, Mark.
On behalf of the Maine Forestry Museum, just wanted to thank the town of Rangeley for all their support during the Logging Festival and Parade this past weekend. The highway department did a lot with cones and signage and stuff. You folks in the park commission, authorized the events and the use of the town park for the log rolling and stuff. And the police department was very helpful in crowd control. The fire department participated in the parade and stuff, so all of the support from the town is much appreciated.
It's a great event. All right, with no further select board communication, I will entertain a motion to go into this executive session.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to enter executive session, MRSA Title 1, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, 405, 6E, consultation with legal counsel.
Ethan's motion,
Second.
and Shelley seconds. All those in favor? All right, declare us out of executive session at 8:43 with no action taken. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Ethan's motion. Shall we seconds? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.